As the price per pound started to go down, labor efficiency needed to go up. My name's Jacob Nelson. I'm Vice President of Cultivation for the ProGro Pure Options Michigan team. We originally rolled into ProGro. It was about 3 labor hours a day cumulatively. That was spread across 3 people. Now we have 1 building operator, and it probably takes them about 30 minutes to do the equivalent on a daily basis.
We had 48 zones of irrigation in that building, so 48 batch tanks we actually had set up there, 1 for each zone, which was kind of unique. And those were all being hand mixed at the time. You know, that's not something you can have an entry-level employee doing necessarily, you know, so that had to be some of our more trained people, and to do 48 tanks every day took a lot of those people. So it was a lot of labor. User error is a thing, and like no matter how good your people are, when you're mixing that many tanks every day, there's going to be mistakes. And you know, we really wanted to pull that back, and we thought automation was going to be a good way to kind of get control over that.
But after about a year or 2 doing that, you know, we were at the point where we went through the growing pains of a new building, and you know, learned all the nuances of what was unknown, and needed to start automating processes and creating lean flow situations for ourselves.
After about a year or so of operation, they decided to make the switch from direct injection to filling up batch tanks and setting that nutrient solution to their vegetative rooms for purposes of consistency and increasing flow rates to certain zones.
Instead of having to actually go in and pour salts and mix up, you know, water and salts individually, we can press buttons and make it happen now. If I have to do that for 10 to 12 ingredients over 4 batch tanks a day, that saves me 40 mixes I have to do. So it saves an incredible amount of time.
We have seen a lot better consistency since we went to the automation, so that did work for sure. And I think, you know, the biggest thing is like our operators that were mixing tanks are now looking at plant health, and they're doing IPM scouting, and they're, you know, really doing the things that are more important that we want those high-level operators doing. So instead of just, you know, 2 hours a day mixing tanks, now it's actually doing the stuff that we need these people doing to really get the best results we can.
We have one centralized system that's central and trusted. We can look at all the components of this controller on a daily basis to make sure they're running correctly. And I'm not chasing down 3 people with 3 meters or, you know, 12 rooms.
We can customize this schedule to any room, any quantity, and any number that we need it to. The controller has been able to scale any volume, any quantity, and any number of plants that we've needed to.
For a company like us in this industry at this time, like scalability is huge. So like a system that can go from a small setup to a big setup really easily, it was really important to us to be able to expand out like that. So that's where the DS controllers do a really good job.
The ability with the alarms and the parameter control and the controller that kind of like will help us identify problems is huge. And I don't need to rely on 5 people being proficient at something without making a mistake, and the checkpoints and critical control points that you had to put in place to like make sure like all the manual logging of, you know, pH readings and EC, all those things can now be summed into a controller and just, you know, reported via alarms, and simplified that process.
We're very, very tight on those alarms right now. So if we are off by like a 0.2 pH or a 0.1 EC, that'll trigger an alarm, and we don't really see that many of those alarms at this point. So it is very consistent for sure. And I think, you know, that kind of consistency with a hand mix is hard to get.
It's allowed uniformity, scalability, and just control, where before it was a lot of data tracking just to make sure people were doing the right things.
I think the biggest thing for me is the customization and the flexibility. I think almost every grow is scaling to some degree, and like being able to do that scaling and what you need to do in the software to configure that scaling on your own is really huge.
Dilutions has one of the most easily navigatable interfaces I've seen yet. It's very intuitive.
We've been working very much hand in hand with Mark here, Wally, Chris, constantly pushing the boundaries, constantly adapting the software. Anytime we're, pitching ideas to them, they've been responsive and willing to collaborate.
I think, any big investment is daunting. I think in this case, for us, it saved us so much labor that the ROI was just, it made sense. But I think over time, it's that consistency that's really going to make the difference. And I think as cost per pound goes down, the market gets more competitive. Like maintaining consistent yields and consistent quality is the name of the game. I would have no hesitation recommending the DS controller to other operators in the industry.